Here's a question almost nobody asks, because the answer feels too obvious to bother with. Why did liberalism win? Not is it correct? Is it the truth? Is it valuable? Just why did it actually spread further and faster than almost any political idea in history? The normal answer is relying on truth or value, because individual rights, markets, democracy, the world figured out these were the correct way to be and adopted them. And I think that answer is pretty much wrong. And the real explanation tells you something much more useful and much less comfortable about what's happening to liberal societies right now. Let's start somewhere nothing to do with politics. Why does one technology spread and another one doesn't? Not which one is better, but which one actually wins in the real world, given everything else going on at the time. QWERTY beat better keyboard layouts. VHS beat Betamax. Quality isn't the thing that predicts what spreads. Fit is. Does this thing work for specific conditions it's competing in against the specific rivals it's actually facing? Not is it the optimal, ideal version of this, but just right here, right now, for these people, does it fit better? And better, not best. And political systems are the same. They don't get judged by some neutral philosopher kings weighing up the truth content or the value content. They compete under specific conditions against rivals for the loyalty of actual people. And by that measure, liberalism's record is stunning. In 1973, for example, by Freedom House's own count, around 40 of the world's roughly 150 countries could reasonably be called free. Spain was a dictatorship. Portugal was a dictatorship. We had the Soviets. China was still going through the Cultural Revolution. And then one generation later, the number had gone from 40 to 117. It's a very fast, large-scale transformation in how humans organize themselves, and probably the largest that's ever been recorded. So liberalism won, fast, decisively, and why? So part of it is generally and structural. Every system eventually hits the same wall. How do you get large numbers of strangers in one society to cooperate? We had monarchies beforehand, I think 500 years ago. They solved it with personal loyalty, running up through the lords and into the monarch itself. That's fine, but societies kind of get too big and complicated for that to really hold together past a certain scale. And most of our societies today are kind of get at that scale or above it. So liberalism solved that problem differently. Instead of loyalty to a single person, we had impersonal rules. Strangers could trade and cooperate without really needing to know each other or to trust each other or to even like each other. And so this isn't about morality, it's not about values, it's more about engineering. How can we structurally have a large society that is cohesive and that cooperates? And this kind of liberalism structure just managed to scale a bit more comprehensively than monarchies seem to have done prior to that. So mechanism 2, a bit more blunt, but a lot of people leave this part out, but liberal societies won wars, they got rich. Both of these are extremely persuasive on their own. If you conquer someone, you can impose liberalism on them, for example. Nobody in 19th century, 18th century India sat down and figured out through Locke that they wanted, a liberalism setup. The Royal Navy showed up. We had them as a colony. We implemented in piece by piece liberalism. And then when they got their independence, they basically kept those liberal institutions. It's not quite as clean as, the Navy did it or we did it, because there is still persuasion that's required on the population. They can't just be forced into a fit that doesn't fit them. You have to win over their hearts and minds as well. And that's not an instant thing. It's a gradual process. It happens over generations. And actually it's how we did it in India. We started off by keeping a lot of their laws in place. And then through education, through teaching them about our own beliefs of liberalism, it did filter in until they had a clear middle class layer, which were more and more liberal. And that eventually led to the liberalism sticking in the country. Not perfectly. No country has a perfect implementation of liberalism, but more so than they had in the past. And that's really how it can, not so naturally, but kind of evolutionary build up in a certain place. So beyond that as well, it wasn't just Britain who imposed it on the colonies. America has had their influence, especially over the Cold War. Think about the Cold War security guarantees. They increasingly came with you need a liberal democratic constitution attached. Not as a courtesy, it was a precondition. The IMF and the World Bank lending from the 80s onwards had explicit political strings attached, not just economic ones. And really, it's not so much that imitation won the day. Power has been a massive part of why liberalism arrived in the first place. And then finally, there's another kind of driver of liberalism's kind of spread and proliferation. And it's actually a pretty interesting one that I find most people miss. But liberalism produces missionaries, actual missionaries, something close to the religious sense. Think about Roy Stewart's wife, who was spreading feminism in Afghanistan. There's no benefit of doing that to Britain. It has no impact on us. There's no win back we get from that. It actually costs us resources because we're funding her to do that through charities or and political funding for USA and so on. But she's a clear missionary for liberalism in a completely separate society to her own. There are also more, economists who genuinely believe in liberalism, and they have spent their careers trying to spread it to parts of the world which don't yet have it, irrespective of, again, how that would impact their own countries, their own societies, their own groups that they theoretically should be prioritizing and be a part of. And funnily enough, those economists and Roy Stewart's wife and lots of these other missionaries don't even care really about the country they're going to, whether they're the right fit for liberalism. They just want to impose it. It's a very funny missionary approach. You can imagine it much like the missionaries going across to America 500 years ago. Those are societies not ready for Christianity. They're getting it anyway. Here we've got societies not ready for liberalism, getting it anyway. And liberalism has been very powerful like that, creating these people to go out and do this for them. And these people do genuinely believe it. They're not, they're not there because of power. They're not there for their own personal gains. They genuinely believe this is the right thing to do. And liberalism has produced multitudes of these missionaries. So where does that leave liberalism? One, because it's correct. I think it looks like maybe the wrong question, or at least a small part of the real answer. Liberalism didn't spread because it was true or because it was high value. It spread because it was extraordinarily good at spreading. With the scale it can achieve in a society, the military conquest it supported, the economic power it built, and therefore the imitation that others tried to copy. These are real power levers, and beyond these as well, it had these missionaries I just mentioned to go out and spread it. And it's a massive achievement. It's the biggest cultural achievement of the last 300 years, but good in spreading and truth and correctness and value are not the same claim. It's a completely different thing whether something proliferates and or spreads versus is it correct. And that gap is very interesting because a tool that's good at spreading itself doesn't necessarily stay well matched to the society carrying it. Our own liberalism, for example, has evolved, and it doesn't mean that it's still the right match and fit for us, but it's still here, it's still proliferated. And what happens when that very thing that made liberalism win, that proliferation, what happens when that starts working against the people who adopted it? I'll tackle that next time.